It's been one hell of a year for Firaxis Games, and I mean this in the most literal sense. Ever since Civilization 7 has released, it has been plagued with complaint after complaint, ranging from performance issues, underwhelming UI design, questionable monetization practices, AI forward settling issues, the list goes on and on. But if you're familiar with this channel, you're probably aware that I've gone over these issues incessantly at this point, and rerunning those same critiques isn't the focus for this video. Instead, I'd like to cover some of my more positive experiences with the game after 6 months of updates and 300 plus hours of gameplay on my end to discuss if Civ 7 is worth getting into or getting back into at this moment. I also want to take the chance to go over my experiences with the Right to Rule DLC that was just released and whether that is worth checking out. So if you're into that kind of thing or just want to see me yap on end about Civ 7, stay until the end of the video. Now, the last video I posted to this channel was more than 3 months ago, and a lot has changed since then. Loading screens received a huge overhaul, and featureful narrations from Gwendolyn Christie have been added to the game. The 1.2.3 update allows you to scroll through both your leader abilities and culture abilities, even including some tips. This change comes at the end of a very aggressive campaign by Firaxis to polish Civ 7's UI, and whether or not this was successful is up to you. But as someone that was critical of the art direction and implementation of menus from the beginning, I think what we have now is an acceptable compromise compared to where we started. Are we at the same level of polish as Civ 6's UI? God no. But I think the feedback the game gives you is in a much better state. To be more precise, it provides more information from hovering over things like technologies and map tiles. Text boxes overlap with each other far less, which makes pop-out windows more bearable. And the Civilopedia has received a lot of new information outlining things like legacy paths in better detail. For newer players, this is one of those areas that is harder to explain if you didn't play at launch, but we'll probably continue to see the occasional UI improvement here or there as the developers move on to other areas of the game to focus on. Speaking of other areas, I have to say that the general feel of maps has improved substantially. This was a big target of earlier patches because they sucked ass. I don't have a better way to describe it. It's like if you made me draw Germany from memory with my very limited artistic skills. Suffice to say, the results weren't pretty. A lot of the issues players were reporting seem to stem from how maps are generated. For instance, if you take a gander at screenshots from late February, all of the maps have this very jagged look to them. The coasts have these abstract, unnatural bays where the continent will cut off sharply where it meets the ocean. My general takeaway was that this was the result of the game needing to generate a set amount of islands for the map, which act as a buffer zone between multiple continents, which then resulted in corners being literally cut. As of the time I am writing this specific issue has largely been fixed, with a few of my recent games having the occasional stray edge or unnatural curve. I find myself playing with Pangaea far more with Civ 7 than I did with Civ 6. There aren't any huge changes save navigable rivers, which have appeared more reliably for me compared to other maps like continents in the past. 1.2.0 saw the addition of a whopping 10 new resources. I bring this up because my games have been more varied with things like mangoes, rice, and hardwood added. They have a subtle but noticeable change to how different regions of the map feel. In essence, different biomes feel more distinct than they did previously. That's not to say they lacked an identity at launch, but treasure resources were locked to the new world, and my starts felt a hell of a lot more static because of that. These two additions put together made me want to actually come back to the game, and I think 1.2 was one of the best patches we've had so far. Now, I've said I wouldn't try to be too negative with this video, but something I've tiptoed around is the new world. It's a very divisive feature, and basically, you have a set of unexplored land that is locked to the exploration age, where you can then explore ocean tiles to begin colonizing. Some people have called it Eurocentric, others say it ruins the pace of the game, and I am still shockingly undecided about it. As someone that leans towards a tall-ish playstyle, I hate having to expand when I'd rather just hunker down and focus on my city skyline simulator. That said, when I do want to expand and start forming my own colonies, I don't mind sending a few extra settlers westward. I touched on this previously, but if you want to play with a few cities, it feels like the game is actively punishing you by not playing wider. More cities equates to higher yields, plain and simple. That, and you are completely locked out of a major victory path for the exploration age because you can't create treasure fleets. I think the game would be better served with a completely reworked economic victory. Thankfully, the game now allows you to disable certain victory types, but their absence feels glaring. Specifically, the economic victory type for this exploration age is awkward. Treasure fleets just generate golden points for your home cities. That's it. So if any of the developers are watching, I'd love to see more effort put into making colonies feel distinct instead of being far off, generic settlements. Perhaps you could balance the amount of treasure fleets generated depending on how heavily you tax your colonies, which could then affect their happiness. The exploration age in general doesn't feel distinct enough, and this is a larger problem with any period after antiquity. This could be an entire video by itself, but I've talked long enough about it, and I'm sure the comment section has better ideas on how to improve it. AI balancing is one of Civ's oldest enemies and was sorely lacking on release, but the developers have done a solid job at fixing most of my concerns. Namely, forward settling was an absolutely atrocious experience that the AI employed at every turn after release. You would literally see Hatshepsut forward settle the crappiest piece of land imaginable while her capital was halfway across the map. I think this can still be an issue if the AI is packed in, but it's not as bad as it was, and I consider this to be a triumph. Opponents are also generally more competitive. AI city planning was pretty rough before major patches were released, so I don't think the computer had a good idea of what buildings to prioritize, which led to wild differences in difficulty from leader to leader. For example, my games against Catherine were always sweaty, but if I was facing someone like Jose Rizal, they were embarrassingly easy. Another factor that plays into this is that the AI is just better at managing units. My games compared to launch will almost always have multiple back-to-back wars that feel planned out by opponents in advance. Though, what about the actual paid content I was clickbaiting in the thumbnail with? Well, originally, the Right to Rule DLC was expected to launch much earlier in the summer, i.e. a few months ago. However, whether due to public outcry or simple time management, it was pushed back to late July and mid-September. As of right now, I have a few games under my belt with the new Assyrian and Diviet civilizations. Design-wise, these are some of the best cultures yet, and when you put these two civs against the civs from the last DLC, it reminds me of when we first started to see really creative ability designs in Gathering Storm and the New Frontier Pass. That's not to say Carthage or any of the other cultures from Crossroads of the World are poorly designed. I really enjoyed playing the British or Bulgarians from time to time when the situation called for it. It's just that, overall, Vietnam and Assyria have really solid designs that have a consistent theming in their traditions and unique infrastructure. Let's take Assyria for example. Since we were robbed of its inclusion in Civ 6, I thought that the gameplay might lend itself to endless wars like in Civ 5. Yet, they have a very unique balance between city building and warfare. Assyria ties science and warfare together unlike any other antiquity culture by not being able to get codices via tech. Normally, these are something you pick up through research, but now are incentivized to get through warfare. For each settlement captured, Treasures of Nineveh grants a technology. Then, when you research Tupsarutu, captured settlements provide a codex. Top this off with a very strong unique commander, plus cavalry unit, and Assyria is one of the strongest cultures for early warfare. But as a pathetic, pacifist player that usually shies away from conflict, Assyria encouraged me to give war a chance because of their buildings. The Citadel synergizes with codex hoarding, and grants a flat production bonus and happiness if built on flat terrain. The Royal Library is where the juicing starts. For every adjacent river tile, you gain +1 science to this building. If that wasn't enough, it has multiple codex slots that further synergize with their unique quarter, the Ekalu. Ekalus grant production for each codex slotted. I personally love taking a leader with multiple bonuses like Lafayette and fitting this into Assyria's on and off playstyle of building up military rapidly, taking a few cities, and then hunkering down for a dozen turns. Traditions like Durrani add science to fortification tiles, and keep in mind this stacks with walls. Some of the comments I've come across on Reddit have already decried this culture as being overpowered, and I can't really disagree. The catch is that they aren't bland like some of the other militarist cultures, and they have a unique wonder-rushing playstyle thanks to their unique abilities. My sole complaint is that Dur Sharukin did not receive a facelift or any additional changes since it is not a new wonder, but it still meshes well with their overall playstyle. Diviet is the second culture that comes with Right to Rule, and it takes a very different, but surprisingly compatible playstyle with Assyria. They also have bonuses for fortifications, but focus much less on warfare, opting instead for pop growth and culture. By the way, I won't even attempt to pronounce these abilities because I know my pronunciations will be terrible. I'll put the info card up on the screen and save myself the embarrassment. But their default civ ability grants culture for every urban population each time you build a fortification building. Since Assyria is big on walls, this also synergizes very well with their science bonus from earlier. Their second ability comes in two parts. The initial combat strength during wars is great, but I found it to be less reliable as I tend to heavily turtle with a civ. However, the tradition that you unlock that provides additional production to fortification buildings is incredible early on. Walls are in a sort of awkward spot because you have to build them piece by piece, unlike other games where it's a one and done situation. This makes the initial production cost much more bearable, and you are rewarded for doing so with additional yields on top of that. This pairs decently well with their wonder, which I also won't try to pronounce, which increases the specialist limit for cities that have a set number of walls. With the Voichien, their unique unit, I found my cities to be an absolute nightmare for the AI to take, and I suspect this is a great follow-up culture to civs like the Maya or Egyptians, which thrive when left to their own devices. Now, the other part of their kit is centered around rivers and the water puppet theater. For me, this feels fairly similar to Hawaii's Lo'ikalo, which acts as an improvement and buffs food output. Similarly, it's a great idea to put down as many as you can because they provide increased culture from natural disasters. The unique settler doubles down on this by prioritizing tropical tiles. For each tropical tile near the capital, you get a set amount of culture. In many ways, the Vietnamese mirror Assyria's science focus with a culture focus of their own. Additionally, I feel like both of these cultures are superior remixes to base game civs like Persia and Hawaii. That's not to say any of the aforementioned civs are bad, but I was pretty disappointed with Persia's iteration compared to Civ 6, and certain aspects of Hawaii's kit for me felt unfocused, like the kahuna. Before buying this pack, I would wait and see if Silla and Kahar are as solid as these cultures, but I've been impressed with what I've seen so far. I've only played against Genghis Khan, but he has an incredibly strong ability that rewards aggressive playstyles, which was what I expected, to be fair. But the elephant in the room is the price point. $30 is a massive amount of money to be asking for this DLC, and I simply cannot recommend it based off of that. I've received this product for review, but if I did not have a very specific reason for buying it, I would wait for it to go on sale. This is the same price as Crossroads of the World, and I would struggle to justify buying that for less than half of its current price. 4 civs, 2 leaders, and a handful of wonders for $30? In this economy? I get that these decisions on price points were determined months ago, but when Civ 7 player counts are nearing an all-time low for a game that was released last February, these patches might not be enough to win back the player base or consumer confidence. What we've seen so far is very promising, and Civ 7 is improving greatly. Auto Explore is finally in the game with this patch, and some of the initial complaints about error transitions are being addressed. For one, there's a lot more customization when it comes to turning off certain victory paths, crises, and making Civ Unlock requirements optional. That's great. The catch is that this is not a one-size-fits-all solution. All of these features sounded like fantastic additions to the game before launch, but they needed far more time to cook and the end result was half-baked. If we have to sacrifice further UI improvements and things like map customization for the time being to improve core mechanics, then that's a sacrifice I'm willing to take. You're free to disagree with me, and if you think there's something else the devs should focus on, then please let me know in the comment section down below. In my many hours playing this game, I've come to the conclusion that there's an identity crisis at play here. I've referenced the split victory types on end here, but this might just have to wait before an expansion until a significant amount of time has been devoted to the issue. As it stands, Civ 7 is in a much better state at launch. Many of the minor, annoying issues have either been ironed out or partially addressed. But like I said, we still haven't received reassuring news on bigger fixes coming for the main selling points of this game. If you've already bought Civ 7 and haven't played since release, I think you may appreciate some of the new changes like Pangea, better AI, and new resources. But if you haven't bought the game, then I would wait until it is on sale, or you can find a bundle that is fairly priced. So if you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comment section what you'd like to see me cover next. If you didn't, please let me know where you think I can improve as I try to read every comment. Civ 7 still has a huge amount of potential, but I fear that it will take an expansion before this is fully realized. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you all in the next video. Peace.